Hello and welcome to Thanatology Themes. I am your host, Carolyn, therapist and thanatologist. I am thrilled today. We have an amazing person joining us. Anna Jenkins is the lead spiritual care counselor from VNS Health in hospice. FYI, side note, I worked with her. I know how amazing she is, and we might share some stories today. So we are going to start with our Handbook of Thanatology, my favorite book. Yay! So as an introduction to the work that Anna does, I'm just going to read a little bit of our evidence-based practice, okay? This is from the Journal of Hospice and Palliative Care. I'm sorry, the Journal of Hospice and Palliative Nursing. Okay. Religion and spirituality can be a significant resource for patients and families to endure loss and suffering, as well as a resource to enhance their decision-making and coping abilities during end of life. Research suggests that religion and spirituality play a significant role in mediating the stressful efforts of dying among both patients and caregivers and result in personal growth and transcendence. So Anna is going to help us understand what all that means. And I'm really excited for her to be here.
Thank you so much for having me here. And it's just really exciting to hear about the incredible work you're doing with the integrated grief. And it's such a privilege to be able to meet again in this circumstance. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Anna. So I wanted to maybe jump in. One of the first things I think we might want to talk about is I learned from you, spiritual care can look like many different things. Sometimes it is about prayer, and sometimes it can be playful. Can you jump in and tell us a little bit about your training or how you came to this idea of what spiritual care really means?
Thank you so much. That's such a great question. And, it's so interesting because culturally, spiritual care counselor and chaplain are used interchangeably, but most people are familiar with the concept of chaplain. We hear that in, the hospital chaplain, the police force has a chaplain, there's school chaplains. And, I think a lot of times the word chaplain conveys, the thought of maybe a Catholic priest, right, or a pastor, a rabbi, some of, really connected to religion. And at VNS, we really thoughtfully considered calling it spiritual care counselor. And, it's really interesting because, as you said, it can be someone's spiritual connection can be connected to their religion. And what I love about the word religion is that in the Latin, it really means to ligament again, ligio, to ligament again. So what are the things that ligament you emotionally, right? And especially in the context of hospice, it's really becomes clear what has been the ligaments of your life, right? As you think back, what are the things that got you through so many hard times, and who's with you right now, right? And that can be who's literally there, but it can also be the people that you remember. As we had a patient who, was grieving the loss of her husband, and that was its own ligament as well. And I know in your work in grief, it's very important to nourish and honor the connections we have, even if someone isn't there, right? I'll just give an example, in terms of the ways that spiritual care and chaplaincy can take on tons of different meanings. And, in terms of my role, my sole purpose is to help the person reconnect to their ligaments, like to anything, to a source of meaning. And the truth about it is that process is not smooth, right? A lot of times we are broken. We have a stress fracture, to go with the physical metaphor. And maybe we have a lot of hurt that we have to kind of think about. And so we sit with people both in these places of deep hurt and also hold up and affirm and celebrate things that are nourishing. I'll just give one story of that. This was actually in a hospital setting. My hospice work we're mainly caring for people in the homes, as you know from our work. This was a woman who was dying in the hospital setting, and I'd been asked to come and support the family. There were a lot of tensions, and I think that's important to name, because it's not something we talk about. Any of the tensions we've had over the years with our, whether it's family or the family we choose, the people that love us, they're absolutely exacerbated in this moment. They all come out. So I entered the room and she was, in her late 80s, and there were, all different, she'd had many children. There were probably 12 people, and they were arguing, and she was so peaceful in the bed, which was a striking contrast, and she was definitely dying. And I just stood there for a moment, and I noticed there was one person in the room not yelling or arguing, and it was her grandson. And he was sitting at the foot of his grandma's bed. And so when there was a pause, I asked him, "Can you tell me something that you love about your grandma?" And he said, without hesitation, "Her meatballs." In the room, I get the shivers. Suddenly, every person in that room was just with him and those meatballs with her. And then people began to tell the story of how she made her meatballs, for a wedding party. She made them for a graduation. She brought meals when one of her daughters had cancer treatment. She brought meatballs. She brought meatballs when another child went through a divorce. When we go through life, we need the meatballs in this family. That was their thing. And so you could feel almost this spiritual, like linguine or spaghetti connective tissue, again, the ligaments. Suddenly we were in a space of holiness and thinking about holy, like whole, WHOLE. They became a whole unit and focused in on what really mattered, is that she had loved each of them, and in loving her, they were able to love each other. So thank you so much. It's a great question.
So that's beautiful. And I think you bring up something really important that I talk about. We work with every family, caregiver, patient individually, right? There's no formula. And often there are conflicts, or, I always say things don't change just because you're dying, whether it's finances or family conflict or all of these kinds of things, right? So there's a lot of talk nowadays about a good death, which actually should be a good dying, because we're talking about the dying process, but it's okay. But how we achieve that looks different for every family. And for this family, it was talking about meatballs. And I think that's both important. And I think that that's kind of the key for social workers, spiritual care counselors, or chaplains, as they are called in other parts of the country sometimes. How we find the key for healing for this family or for this patient, right? It's got to be unique for each person. And you really, you have a gift for that. You have a gift for really tuning into what is healing, like I said, for this patient or for this family. That's a lovely story. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. You talk about, the individual and how I'll give just another example of this. Somebody who comes to mind is, and again, it's important to me to say the things that we don't always say culturally, right? You go in with the Hallmark cards, right? It's get well, not only get well, get physically well is what it means, and do it soon. Get well soon. Another one is sorry for your loss, right? So we're sorry for you over there who's having a loss, and as if it's one loss, whereas we know one loss connects all the other losses we've had, and it's not just a singular thing we're going to just, wipe away, so in and through that, this was someone having a difficult death. She was in her early 70s, and she was really mad that she was dying. And she had gotten a diagnosis of brain cancer a year prior. And she was a community gardener. That was her source of real joy and her call. And this person, had some struggles with mental health. And I won't go into the details, but she was really angry and yelling and had a really tough time. And it was so striking because you enter her home, and this is like a Brooklyn. She lived in this apartment 35 years, like every real landlord's nightmare, when they're paying like $300 for a floor through in Brooklyn Heights. But that aside, so it was alive. Her space is alive, and yet here was this sort of block. And I said to her, she'd thrown a plate, and I said, we are here in this space. And it was the social worker, myself, this wonderful aide. And I told her, I come in your home and I want to know who this person is. I want to know about you and the beauty and the story. And sometimes you make it hard. Like, we want to love you. And she stopped yelling and she started weeping, and she said, how do I love? How do I let someone love me? And this is one of the things that the gift of being human is, this invitation to do the very scariest thing for many of us, to both give love and be vulnerable enough to receive it. And so this moment was a turning point in our journey together. And I said, we held hands, and she said, where do we begin? She's very practical too. And I said, well, Shirley, how about you teach me how to keep a fern alive? And she's like, okay. And so then we went through, the plants, and she gave me lessons. And so I'd like to share a photo that I think really captures. And this is one of the days she was taking a nap. And in your mind, just for a moment, if you just close your eyes, I invite anyone listening, imagine yourself in a hospital setting. Imagine maybe the emergency room, there's a sheer curtain. You're hearing so much noise. Maybe you're in the ICU. There's a lot of machines, a lot of cords, and a lot of white color. And now I invite you into this space. This right here, this is the difference.
Rise if your eyes were closed.
Yeah, you open your eyes. Sorry.
No, that's amazing. Wow.
Yeah, and so it's just, this was this beautiful person who, and the beauty of a person is we're complex. We do get mad, we do get bad news and go through hard things. And what was beautiful about her is she taught me how to be a counselor for her. You said everybody needs something different. So for her, she wanted to teach me about how to be a community gardener. And what that did for her is it let her be a gardener, not my patient, right? So I'm just going to I'll stop sharing in a moment, but a couple things she taught me. One is she said, listen to the plants and they'll tell you where they want to be. And she had a lot of hate for these highly planned out landscaped yards. She said the plants are so angry. They hate it. They're forced, hedges, all this. And she said they love to mix and mingle, right? They're polyamorous, they love it. It's like, why do we kind of, and she was just lovely person. So that was one of the things, listen to the plants. And that for me meant listen to her and listen to all of the people we work with. The second thing was this plant in the background that's up crawling on the wall. That's a bougainvillea. And she taught me that there are these pink, what I thought was the flowers that come out. And she said, no, 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 no. She said, this is where we all get it wrong with the bougainvillea. And she opened it and she showed me there's a little bud tucked in. And she said, that's the actual flower, but you don't see it because you're so focused on the pink and the prettiness. And that I think is about life, that we really love to celebrate babies, right? In our culture, we want to celebrate the young. And when we're old, there's a lot of grief around our bodies changing, especially in the dying process. It's not a time where we feel necessarily beautiful, right? But there is beauty. And to me, it's actually the greatest place, the most beautiful place, because it's amidst so many reasons that you could feel differently, right? In Buddhism, they talk about this with the concept of the lotus, and the funny thing about this beautiful lotus flower is it won't grow unless it's really muddy, really dirty. And then here it is, so thank you. It's a great thing to have recalled. I appreciate you bringing it up.
Yeah, and I also think that it connects to wisdom. This idea of, I think there's something in experience and wisdom are beautiful, right? And we don't always recognize that in our culture. It reminds me a little bit of my learning of Carl Jung, of what you're saying. It connects to, he had this theory that humans were almost like a slab of like marble. I think it's marble, whatever artists can sculpt into. And as you get older and you grow and learn and become wiser, kind of what you're saying about looking at the bud, the sculpture becomes more, you're more of who you are as you get older, and the sculpture becomes more of a piece of art from, as you're kind of chiseling through it. It just, there's something in what you were saying that just kind of reminded me of that, or connected to that idea.
I love that so much. And I think that it reminds me of actually somebody who, when I was going through a really difficult time in my life, and, things that I thought were important about who I am, my identity, I was losing. And a wise woman said, no, you're just getting rid of anything that's not Anna. And it just really resonated with that's such a beautiful example, Carolyn. And in terms of the wisdom, I'll just share, there was a woman who, let's see, a lot of times people like to connect. So we call it social joining as a part of chaplaincy work. And this isn't because it's just fun to be social. That's not the real point of it, is to be somebody who's visiting this person. I'm not taking their blood pressure, that things I'm not doing are more important than what I do, right? I'm not peppering them with questions. I lead with listening, as you and I did in our visits. And I'm meeting them. I want to know who you are, right? And also, I want you to show me who you want me to see, right? Like if somebody wants to talk about things they're not afraid of, and they don't want to talk about their fears, that's okay, right? That's okay. And because there's enough people that are going to ask about those things, And this woman was somebody who really loved to give advice to me. She took a shine to trying to just about everything, but she noticed, that I didn't have a wedding ring on. And, as we call these, like, unintentional disclosures about herself. people notice. And she said, well, if you're single, I just need to tell you something from 85 years on this planet. She said, and for me as a heterosexual, she said, a man would have to be really great to be better than your own company. A man would have to be so great to be better than your own company. And it was just such a lovely and loving thing to say. As opposed to other patients, when they see, it was actually this couple from Puerto Rico originally, and it was so interesting. He was 108, she was 106, and their beds, hospital beds, were next to each other, and they held hands, and they were very intent upon matchmaking for me. So, they did prayers, and it was funny, but they just to hear, and I think to hear the love stories is so, so beautiful. Like, he was working bagging groceries when they were really young. And she was shopping and she dropped a penny and he went down to pick it up and they bumped heads, and like the rest is history, and I'll just, in terms of wisdom, there's just one more that is so cool to me. It was the oldest patient I've ever had. She was 110, and she I just was like, teach me, and because she'd been through really hard times financially, and it was not easy. And she said, there's only one thing to know about surviving and living well and long. You need to prepare for the winters of your life. Prepare for the winters of your life. And I know she meant literally, it's good to have heat. But also, yeah, that winter does come, and, sadness comes, loss is our birthright. And I loved that idea of preparing for it as opposed to battening down the hatches, hoping it doesn't happen, So thank you for bringing that up, the wisdom of our teachers here.
Yeah. Well, is this a good time to talk about twerking?
Yeah. Is there a bad time? You lead us in the story.
So, Anna and I did quite a bit of either singing. Once in a while, we do some dancing with our patients, for our patients. We would sing with the families. We'd invite them in, and we'll talk more a little bit about that later. But we would also do some singing, some dancing. This is the dancing. So we had a patient. You remembered it more than I do. Did she get kicked out of the senior center for twerking?
We loved her. We loved her. Mhm.
So she was a little too risque at the senior center. By the time we met her, I think she was home and she was bedbound, I believe. Now, how did we choose the music? I think we let her choose the music, right?
Yes, she gave us songs that, to lead into, things you can't get too wrong, but somehow I managed to flunk every time. But it's very clear you were the dancing queen, thank God.
It was great. And I think we brought her a lot of joy, and I think it really uplifted her. I know the aide even would her home health aide would kind of get into it and encourage it. And I think it uplifted her spirits when we were there. And then I forgot, it was like Dancing with the Stars.
Oh, yes. Do
So
you want to, should we go down memory lane?
Sure.
Okay, actually, let me, here, you keep sharing. I'm just gonna locate that video real quick.
Yeah, a trip down memory lane. So we would do our dancing, and then I think she would give us our rating, what we would get for the rating, and the home health aide was in it. And I do remember she had a daughter who I think daughter didn't stay for the dancing, but knew that like this, made mom happy, or it was, I don't remember if it was a niece or a daughter, but a family member who was excited when we showed up. This was really brightened this woman's day. And this was spiritual care. This was the hospice team doing their work. And so I just want to say to everybody out there, people don't, what does hospice do? And there's a lot of ideas. Well, hospice does. We weren't exactly twerking. I'm not going to put it out there that a hospice twerks, but we were
Yeah.
dancing as best as we could. And this is providing, there we go. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting nervous. I just want to get it over with this 10 minutes. All right. You ready?
Oh yeah, I'm ready.
All right. Please don't post this interview too far or wide, okay?
Okay, I think we need to do this first. I love it. So you can see we've got our visiting nurse our sweaters, and we're in our hospice, and we're just dancing. So this is spiritual care. This is one aspect of spiritual care and social work and the interdisciplinary team, right?
And I think too, you notice that we're wearing masks there, and one of the things that you and I remember vividly and sadly is working through the pandemic, the height of it. And, this video was as we were able to really, the first time we didn't have to wear the N95 or the shield. And so I think collectively, we were all just hungry to move and sing and connect, and so that was especially important in that moment.
Absolutely, absolutely. And maybe another time we'll talk more about that.
Yeah.
You're right. That's a really good point, is we were able to really do much more social joining with our patients and caregivers once we kind of could take off all that extra stuff and get in there, for sure. Yeah. I'm also remembering we had a patient from, I think from Jamaica, who loved for us to come to sing with her. Um, the Three Little Birds, right? And I think it was really meaningful for her. I'm just going to jump in and to say quickly, she had a daughter nearby, but her daughter was busy, worked full time, I think had kids, was caring, but had her own life. And a lot of times this is true for caregivers, right? Caregivers are out in the world, they have to work, or they have other responsibilities. So sometimes knowing the team is in, I think, is really helpful for a caregiver to say, it takes a little pressure off me. Anna and Carolyn are coming. They're checking on mom, and they're going to sing and dance. And, the caregivers can kind of focus on, their kids, their work, whatever they need to do. So I think that is a piece of it. I know we're talking about patients, but I think we do help caregivers. And I remember with this woman, she had a son who lived with her. I think he had PTSD from, he was a veteran. So, it was just hard for him to support mom, right? So just us being in there sometimes helps family, I think, feel good, feel better, yeah, I don't know if you wanted to add anything about the caregiver, the family aspect about.
Yeah, but I can't hear Three Little Birds without commenting on that first. I mean, we would often admittedly put that on a Monday morning, just because we knew that it would just start the week off in such a positive way. And, I think what was so striking about, again, it's not necessarily the gospel or traditional religion, though she was very connected, and we did many prayers together. But that idea that in the lyrics, three little birds sitting on my window, and in Brooklyn, there are birds that sit on windows, but I never actually saw three little birds on her window, but she did, you know, she saw three little birds. And as we played that song, it was like the birds were there for her, you know, whether they were you, me, and the aide, three little birds, right? But in her heart and soul, she was able to connect to God, I think, and joy. And I think that is spirituality and religion. What we try to do is transport ourselves, right? Whether it's a gratitude practice, I think that's something that's very helpful, where we just, it's like a turning of the heart, you know, whether it's like a befriending of the parts of ourselves that are scared. You know, there's all sorts of ways that we just reorient our thinking, and then our nervous system can feel better. I'm really glad that you know, brought up, it's, you know, thinking about the caregivers is, you know, and the loved ones. This is a really, I mean, it's central to what we do. And I think about, in particular, there was a case, the patient was 13 years old, and it was a very, very difficult, unimaginably sad case. And her mom was from the Dominican Republic originally, and was having a lot of trouble here, you know, in terms of, you know, getting health insurance, taking care of 4 kids. Her partner had left. And so here she is, she's a single mom in a 2-bedroom apartment, and her 13-year-old daughter is dying. She has a 1-year-old baby, you know, and so this poor woman, you would walk in and you would just, you know, it was a lot. It was a lot for her. And, you know, I think what we did, you know, again, sharing about what you said, which is to give the caregiver a chance to just take a little pressure off of them, right? Because the thing is that she couldn't just be her mom. You know, she couldn't just be her mom with her, because she also had to be the mom to all the other kids. She had to, the medication routine was really challenging with the PCA pump in the home. And there was just so much, you know, to do. And so I think our work was to just take as much as we could off of this woman's shoulders, you know. And our social worker, it was really incredible. She was able to find a grant to pay for an overnight nurse, you know, because she was a child, you know, and get that support. You know, and it was so powerful to visit this girl, because, you know, in terms of, you know, you might think of a child, she's, you know, on that cusp with adolescence, but, you know, we have these things like, I think of Make-A-Wish, right? Or some of the cancer foundations, but, you know, she didn't want that stuff. There was a part of her that was sort of disillusioned, you know, that she knew that going to Disney World wouldn't make it so she wasn't dying, which I would say is why, in particular, this case was so difficult, because she was both young, but also quite aware of what was happening. So she told myself and the nurse, she said, the one wish I have is that my mommy and daddy will watch a movie with me in bed and eat popcorn, you know, and that's what she wanted, and it's not what she got. I'll be honest with you. They couldn't, you know, her father had done visiting in the past, but he had stopped visiting. And she said, why is he afraid of me? It's because I'm not pretty anymore. And it's just so heavy. Even imagining somebody having that experience, you know, and at the same time, imagining his experience of losing your beautiful little girl. You know, that's one of the great capacities, I think, in this work. So deep compassion comes from the word to suffer with. Passus is suffering, and calm is with. So we can be with her suffering and his separately. But my time was with her mainly. And it was devastating, you know. And then the family was identified as Catholic, and the mom had, her grandma, and they had decided there was a priest in the Dominican Republic who was known to cure things that other people couldn't cure. So they actually, while she was on our program, took her to on a trip, which we supported families, doing these kinds of things. And, they took her, went very far to find this church, this parish. And, when she got back, I met with her and she started to cry and she said, it didn't work. He couldn't fix me. And, to really just sit with her in the heaviness. And in this case, the apartment was quite small. And so the bed was taking up most of the room. So we would sit on the bed. There was like, just a lot of both the case being very difficult, like inescapable pain and sadness as you walk in this home, but also the beauty of that being deeply with someone in their pain is you're also with them in their love and in their gratitude. And so the nurse loved her, so we all loved her. And the nurse had found this blanket with her name on it, this fuzzy, beautiful blanket. And so she was tucked away, and she had a port needle, and the nurse had to come and change the needle, and she was scared, understandably, because over the weekend they couldn't, do it correctly, so it hurt. And so I sat with her and the nurse while the nurse did the needle, and she showed me a ton of her pictures from her life. She'd had her first boyfriend and did the TikTok. I don't know about any of that, but she showed me, and I guess it was her music, Watermelon Sugar is the song by Harry Styles, and I hadn't heard it, but so I'm really not cool, but she taught me and showed me the video. And so she would put her little head on my shoulder, and we would just watch this video and be transported into Watermelon Sugar. And we talked a lot about God. She really wanted to know, and she said, I don't think God loves me, you know. And so our work together that I was sort of ended up unfolding is that we sort of created a God that she could believe in, because she could believe in this nurse, the tenderness. She knew this nurse was going to come every week, twice a week. She knew I'd come. She knew her social worker would be there. She had her blanket. We did have a priest come from the neighborhood, and we brought her this amazing stuffed animal. And it was just really, how can we find the coziness, right? And the intimacy being held, especially since she wanted to be in her bed. Like, so she was sick and she just wanted someone to lay with her, and I will say that at the end of her life, her father did come, and he was outside. She was having trouble breathing, which was just horrific, to see. And I'd heard that he was outside, so I went and spoke with him, and he was scared, and we never tell people what to do, but we do tell them what's happening, And I said, she's dying and she's calling for you. And he went, and we did take her into the hospital to give more supplemental oxygen and to better manage her symptoms, which we don't always do. But watching him go in that room, and he just cradled his little girl, and he just held her, and to see her like just be cradled by him, and she nestled her head against his chest, and that's God. you know God doesn't give cancer to kids, you know, but there is no place that I have found where there isn't some source of love, right? There's some source, and even if it's imagining three little birds who love you, right? Because a lot of us, we don't really know who God is exactly, but we go about our lives, you know, talking to this person and building a friendship, whether it's three little birds, meatballs, you know, a stuffed animal, a blanket, watermelon sugar. You know, and I guess that's really what I want to say about this work, is that I am so blessed because every single person I meet teaches me about something about who this force is that we all need, but we call by many different names. And it's the greatest possible job. I love it every day.
Yeah, yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. And it is true. You know, pediatric patients really, I'm going to get teary because when you were talking, it brought up some of the, you know, the patients I had worked with over the years, and it's really difficult working with kids who are dying, right? And when you were talking about that image, it reminded me of another image when yeah, was working with the 4-year-old, and just seeing, like you said, the father watching these dads cradle these kids is just breaks your heart. So yeah, yeah. You know, so thank you for sharing that, because we have all, you know, this kind of goes to the idea that everyone's dying is different. And we do have 85-year-olds, we have 70-year-olds who are angry, and then we have 13-year-olds and 4-year-olds, you know. And so we work with everybody differently. And you know, what you were saying is we try to find spirituality or what God means in each case, you know, and appropriately to a 13-year-old, it's Harry Styles, right? You know, like, okay. And then to our older people, it's like Frank Sinatra, or, you know, it's appropriate for that person, right? Um, yeah, I have to jump in and be a social worker for a minute. Anna is telling these loving, caring stories, and interdisciplinary team, I was always there, you know, right with you. And I have to let our viewers know, with children, it is a little bit different. When Anna talked about the kid going, even leaving the area, with an adult, we would tend to discharge them. I just have to say, I have to be a social worker and let people know. So children are different. And as you had said at the very end of life, there are a few units that sometimes people can go on. But if people go into the hospital, they also get discharged unless we can find a unit and have some continuity of care, but that can be tricky. And there's fewer and fewer units now all the time where people can go inpatient. I had to be a social worker and add those pieces in. Again, adults are different than kids. We, you know, there's a lot of different, understandably, right? It's very hard for a parent to bring their child home to die. You know, it's so I just want to say that. Yeah. Well, can we shift? You had mentioned the word joy. And this is actually, we got this, I'm gonna say this is from Maha Rose. We can say, oh, yours is more readable than mine. Joy is something we create together. Am I holding mine the right way? Okay. Um, so I don't know. Do you want joy is something, this is, you know, social joining and these kinds of, I mean, we have talked about this, but you know, I just thought I'd bring it up again. Anything else about joy is something we create together? Oh,
Yeah, I think, oh, sorry, I was muted. You know, it's just, it is so tough, right? Because this, you know, there's like this heart, I was a DJ in college, and like to go from describing a child dying, it's like go from fast song to, or slow song to it's like a rough, and I just want to just name the difficulty of that transition, and that the holiness of this to me is that both are true at once, right? Death is both one of the scariest things, I think, when, a lot of working with people in your practice and any human that I'm intimate with has shared, it is scary, it can be scary, to think about. And the things that happen in that space are a lot of people live for the first time. And that's the thing I didn't know. I didn't go into this path being curious about death, to be honest. I was a high school teacher. I loved kids and I loved teaching. And my life fell apart and personally, and then this new path opened, So I kind of just found myself here, and then I realized, holy moly, this is actually really joyful, and um, one example of that. And so like watermelon sugar was absolutely joyful. Like my heart in those visits and being with her, my heart got bigger, like my capacity to love, and even my belief in God, right? As a Buddhist, we don't, which is my primary faith tradition, it's not something that we talk about, and it's not a conflict of interest to also believe in God. Just PR warning. But in that space, I knew when she said, "I don't know if God loves me," I knew in the depths of my being that God loves her. And I don't know for sure who God is, but I knew that force loves her, and I think sometimes you do need the spiritual care counselor, the chaplain, to really be that docking station. And this came up in another visit with a family where a young man, he was 40, and really he's an atheist, and was talking about his career as an architect, and he's really takes refuge in the wondrous paths his mind takes. He's so smart and imaginative, and so in our first meeting, and he was saying, I don't know where I go. I do know who I've been. And he was struggling to kind of find that anchor point. And I told him, in those times when you don't know, we are that anchor. We're that dock. We're going to be your dock, and our team was there and we meant it. You can call 24 hours a day and you're not going to be alone with this. We will be with you at every step, and that was the joy and that, the hope in that space. And then there's more sort of explicit, with the dancing, like it's so clearly a source of joy. But there's one woman who, I'm particularly, we just have a lovely time, and she has dementia, and she's, has had some functional decline. And I would say that that's part of the grieving process that many people do as they are dying. I'm glad you pointed out it's not just death, it's dying. And so, now not being able to get out of bed, right, to have a catheter, a diaper. And so we talk about it. And then at the end, she says, let's pray, and we do prayers. And then we have a special song. And the song is Let Your Little Light Shine. And I always, whenever I have someone with me on visits, I always bring them to meet this woman. She's just lovely. And what she'll do is wave her hands in the air, and I'll say, like, whose light? And she's like, my light. And I was like, what you gonna do? I'm gonna let it shine. And she just, like, to see her say, I'm gonna let it shine. She's in a small bedroom, right? She has no money, right? Where she has almost no material possessions, and she's going to let it shine. And that is life. Like, that's life right there. A good life is, no matter what, to find some part of us that can shine or, connect with someone else. So there's just, it's all there in this work. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, the other word that comes in, and I think maybe the bridge, one thing to add to it is when we were talking about dying children, which is really upsetting and really sad, and there, and talking, there's joy, there's this word meaning making, right? And this is actually a very big theme in grief counseling and bereavement, is meaning making. But this is really something the hospice team does. The spiritual care counselor is a big leader in the meaning making and social work as well. And I like the word meaning making. I also want to interject. Anna had said, just for our folks out there, when I have people with me on visits, I think what you were referring to is often you help train like a doctor in residence or a social worker, or people will shadow you for a day or two, right?
And I make them sing. I have them shine their little light.
This is a doctor fellow from Cornell or I don't know, wherever, and
Yeah.
Anna's making them sing Little Light Shine as part of their training,
The
which
discomfort is it's just it's amazing. But then they get into it. They do. They sure do.
great training for hospice and palliative care doctors to see this. And I'm going to add, years ago when I was on a different team before Anna joined us, we had an old school grassroots hospice doctor said in our interdisciplinary team, which is the whole team, the doctors, the nurses, the social workers, said to the spiritual care counselors also there, said to the spiritual care counselor in front of everybody, your job is more important than mine. So the doctor said that to the chaplain, to the spiritual care counselor. So it's good we train our medical staff to understand that piece, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really, I love working with our physician, and a moment comes to mind recently where the thing about this work is, if you're in the home alone and you're in my discipline and someone's having physical suffering, the helplessness I feel and inadequacy, it's very different than the hospital. And I think that it just really shines a light on the need. I'll be honest. So I was a rower in college, and the thing about crew is you're 8 oars women, and then the coxswain hopefully guiding you along in a straight path. And I was I was this shorty, so I was in the back in the bow, and the only way to move is to move with everybody you see in front of you, right? But you can definitely flip over if you're not, you know, there's all sorts of things that can go wrong in a boat where you really are vulnerable, right? And I think this hospice work reminds me of that, because we absolutely need every person on the team, and this woman was 40, and she had just a really difficult time with pain. And her mom was at her side the whole time, but was disabled, and she just at the end she couldn't do the physical care, and this woman needed medication and she needed it now. And that it was too much. And the doctor, he's just a wonderful person, and he was on his bike that day, and he dropped everything and just came over, and we sat with her and we worked in tandem, to really work with her. And he's done this many times, even by video, he's just, because I think what happens when you take on other roles, it eclipses your ability to be in your role, which is something we talk to caregivers a lot about, because some people, we work with some private, aides, we see people have aides and often privately hire someone. And the thing I hear over and over from these people, that it really lets someone help them if with the means, I got to be his wife again. I got to be just her sister. I got to be, and so for me, I got to be just the spiritual counselor, and and that's why you and I, in our visits, that was a turning point in my life. I really fell more in love with what I do because I just felt your strength, you know, um, and that joy is something we create together, you and me. We had a lot of joy.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's very true. And one of the reasons that we have to work with everybody individually, there are, I would say, a small percentage of people dying. I mean, people can have symptoms. Generally, symptoms can be manageable. Sometimes people are practically asymptomatic, meaning they don't have, but a small percentage of people have really difficult symptoms to manage. And as you said, this interdisciplinary, we really need to work together. You can't really do a lot of spiritual care or social work if someone's in physical pain. It's really, right. So we really need to make sure. Yeah, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, really addressed this, which was one of the things I loved about her work. She said, when someone needs morphine, they don't need a prayer, they need morphine and then a prayer. And I just always, for me, the medicine is also sacred. I mean, for someone, a lot of times with morphine, it can be very scary because in our cultural understanding, we think of that we're hastening someone's death. And there's a lot of teaching around how what we're doing with morphine is very different. It's like 1/70th of the percent. It's a very small dose. And what you see is how it relieves someone's shortness of breath. And it's miraculous, like to be able to address their physical comfort. And I think in many ways, people would be afraid to have a home death, but to be honest with you, I think the care is often um, sort of more immediate and responsive, can be, because the doctor can quickly give an order and the med is right there ready to go, and they can watch like closely. It's a real beautiful thing. And yeah, it is really important.
So we're going to look towards wrapping up in a minute, but I want to read one last quote from our handbook of thanatology, which you can tell I read all the time. And this is from the Journal of Palliative Care. No, it's not. It's from the Journal of Palliative Medicine. In addition to meaning making, spirituality is also expressed in interpersonal relationships by being present, joining together, listening, connecting, creating openings, and engaging in reciprocal sharing. All of these actions are important elements of providing compassionate care at end of life. And we really did cover, I think we gave a lot of great examples today of really that practice that Anna is able to do, and sometimes I was too, to really put that, to really support, to provide that support for patients and caregivers certainly too.
And I would love to just sort of close with, I think if there was one thing, that, because I don't think spiritual care is just with spiritual care counselors and chaplains. This is a big theme when we train our nurses and social workers, is because you're often there when someone passes, which is a very sacred time. And so there's no special, I mean, there is obviously special training, but it's within each of us. Compassion, right, is something all of us, because we go inside a place of us, one quick example, a woman, her mom had passed away, and I often will go to when the person has died to be with the loved ones. And it was very important for her to have her mom be bathed. And I don't, usually get asked. And I decided there's many spiritual traditions where this is a sacred process. And so I helped her bathe her mom and, put on her clothing. And it was sort of sweet. She said, I think we need to wash her hair. She loved having clean hair. So it was a little Twilight Zone, but we're washing our mom's hair, and it was really hard, right? And I was sort of sweating, honestly, like, and it was the summer, and she turned to me and she was crying, and we were both like sudsing up her hair, and she said, you're doing more than you have to right now. And she started to cry. And I said, I hope someone will help me wash my mom's hair, you know.
Mhm.
And the one thing, I guess I was really afraid to go into this line of work. And I'll say the New York Zen Center for Compassionate Care, Contemplative Care, they helped me so much. I went to a grief session, and then I just loved their work. And I said to the monk, oh my God, how am I supposed to pray? I don't know how to pray. I wasn't raised with faith. And he had this deep voice, said, Anna, the one thing needed is to sit with an open heart. That's all that's needed, is you just sit with an open heart. And every time our heart closes down, just take the care that it needs to open back up. And that's how I try to live my life and do this work, you know.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And the Zen Center for Contemplative Care is a really great place for sure.
Mm.
Uh, Absolutely. And that is a beautiful story. Thank you. I am jumping in and being a social worker again. People are gonna be like, Anna's telling these beautiful stories, and here comes Carolyn. And so it's a balance. Like you said, it's a balance of the beauty and the meaning making. I want to let people know. So in New York State, when someone is dying, they are not pronounced. And it could be other states too. I'm not sure. I think in California people do. But anyway, often it is going to be a social worker or a spiritual care counselor who will come when someone dies. It is when someone's on hospice, dying at home. It is often not a nurse, and we would prepare people. I would say one of us can be here for you. It can be me. It can be Anna. We can come if you want us to. However, you don't have to have someone come. But when your loved one dies, please call us. You have to give us the time of death for the death certificate. But we're happy to be there. But please know it could be Anna or one of our social workers. New York State could be other states, but I like to let people know. I didn't know if you wanted to add something quickly to that.
Yeah, I'll just say that it's interesting because as you're right, that Grey's Anatomy, all these shows, right? We have this image of the doctor calling in the surgery, time of death, and while that's not what we do here, right? Because we're not in the hospital, and they're in their room, their space, their home, they're at home, whatever that home is. But I do see a lot of people needing the ritual of saying this person has died, for our, even the death certificate that we have there's an importance culturally. We have our birth certificate and we have a death certificate. And so just the other day, it was a young man, and I was pretty close with the family. And I headed over, they said, we're not sure,
Mhm.
you know, they said that on the phone, we're not sure. And that's very common, and I walked in, and, he actually had been deceased for hours, but they needed in that moment someone to take that sort of authority culturally. It's just within, to have someone that's not you come in and let you know that, and for not every family needs that, but it is beautiful. And that's what we work with the nurses on, is to just really, this is a sacred act to determine and declare that things have changed, that their body is no longer here. So it can be a beautiful thing at the same time. What a great privilege to be able to actually determine this, at the real time when it happened for someone.
Yeah. And I'm just going to jump in. That's sometimes when I would learn from families. My first ever death visit was an Irish family from Ireland, and they opened the windows and they had their own culture. And they said, "You have to say for a cup of tea." And I was like, "Okay, I guess I have to have a cup of tea." And so it was, it was quite beautiful, and I learned from them. And I was there for quite some time. So it was a learning experience for me too. And as you said, and this was a big family, so they had a lot of support, but it was just, they really wanted just someone from the team to be there. And quite frankly, I was happy to be there. They were lovely. They were a lovely family and told stories about, and I really didn't know the patient. I had been brought in at the very end, and it was almost like a memorial in the home. It was like I said, it was quite lovely. And I learned, and I think it was helpful for the family. So, yeah. Well, should we end with, I know it's a special treat that Anna and I are going to give everybody today.
Oh, and so, in terms of gathering people, we really, I think the thing is about religion is it has met a need historically for people, right? Spirituality, to gather, right? Many services have singing of some kind, and singing changes something in us. Like, it's hard to be both fearful and singing at the same time, or feel separate and feel hearing someone else's voice. It changes our nervous system, right? And we have a country where many people don't feel connected to a church or a synagogue, whatever, And so this song came to us as a way that we could participate with any family. And one of the most beautiful, I think, times that we sang it was there was a little baby, and it was a Muslim family from Yemen, and the little girl, was our patient, and she had these two older brothers, and at each visit, and they wanted to learn the song. And so there's a different chorus. The first one is I usually sing it, and then the little boy would jump, add in, and then voices 3, and they would hold their little sister's, like, bless her feet and her hand. I mean, it was just so sweet. But we ended up singing this with them, and it was our ritual, and so it spans all sorts of cultures. And so I will, without further ado, share that, and feel free to join in if you're at home.
This is the sound of one voice, one spirit, one voice, the sound of one makes a choice. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of one voice. This is the sound of voices too. The sound of me and singing with you, helping each other to make it through. This is the sound of voices too. This is the sound of voices too.
I just wanted to add, when we would sing that song, Anna would usually start the first, I would join the second. We'd often have the home health aide join, the family, we'd join each verse, and then we'd all build our voices. So it really was quite a beautiful building of everybody kind of coming together.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to add that piece. Oh, wait, I also want to add, I'm going to ask you add your joyful sound, what you used to say. Make
What
it,
do I? Oh, just that. Oh, well, people feel they're so scared to sing. And then by the time they hear me and hear you, they're like, okay, what the heck? We'll just join on in. Yeah, I think, yeah, I started taking singing lessons, but I realized I don't want to be good, you know? I just want to be into it, just jump on in and, I think when we can, it goes back to being a compassionate caregiver. We're humans and we know not doing things perfectly. And that's one of the things, I think one of the hardest things for a caregiver, a patient where you can't die perfectly, right? We can't care, provide care perfectly. And I think, when someone is a new mom, a new father, a new partner, with a baby, there's so much more support, and understanding. But there is this hope for a time when less care will be needed. And that's not exactly what happens with hospice. And we really have to be with people when you're at your limit. And it's such a privilege, all the things I've learned working with you about the ways that you prepare people and you love them. And I'm glad you're extending your work and it's so exciting. Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you, Anna. You really were amazing. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom and your stories and everything. Really, it's so wonderful having you here today. So I really appreciate everything you've brought and your joyful noises.
Oh, thank you. Blessings. Mm.
Well, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of Thanatology Themes.
Mm.
Thank you, Anna.